Once upon a time, in the very respectable kingdom of Alderwyn, there was Prince Simon, dashing, rebellious, and notorious for sneaking out of the castle at night to gamble, drink mead, and occasionally charm the noble ladies. In the neighboring kingdom of Valoria, there was Princess Tiana, sharp-tongued, scandalous, and famous for turning down no fewer than 16 marriage proposals because they bored me to death. The two kingdoms hated each other on paper, but one night, at a royal treaty signing, aka an excuse for endless wine and terrible lute music, Prince Simon and Princess Tiana's eyes met across the feast hall. Tiana, to herself, well, trouble in tailored pants. Simon, eyeing her, who's the firecracker in silk? By midnight, both were sick of politics, so they escaped to the moonlit royal garden, where the mead made them braver and the rose bushes made excellent cover. Simon, so princess, how do you feel about arranged marriages? Tiana, I feel they should be arranged for other people. They laughed, shared a stolen bottle of spiced wine, and somewhere between teasing insults and whispered secrets about their parents' terrible fashion sense, the air got charged. Simon, you know, it is terribly improper for a prince and princess from rival kingdoms to be alone like this. Tiana, even more improper if one of us were to kiss the other. Neither waited. Behind the rose bushes, history was made, and maybe a few royal garments slightly rumpled. Of course, the next morning, the entire court was scandalized. A chambermaid found Simon's cloak on a hedge, and both kingdoms' kings shouted in outrage, conveniently ignoring their own scandalous youth. But it was too late. The two were already planning their next secret meeting. Tiana, in a whispered letter, meet me behind the stables at midnight. Bring wine. And maybe your shirt this time. Simon, sending a reply via a very confused pigeon, I like you better, scandalous. And so began one of history's most legendary and most whispered about royal love affairs. The moral, sometimes true love isn't polite. It's messy, wild, and worth every scandal. Prince Simon, dressed in a dark cloak match his dark hair, leapt lightly from his horse and tied it to a twisted olive tree. His pulse quickened, not from fear of discovery, but anticipation. He knew she would come. A soft rustle behind him. Princess Tiana appeared, her blonde curls catching the moonlight. A blue cloak drawn tight around her slender frame. Her blue eyes sparkled with defiance and a warmth she reserved only for him. Tiana, teasingly, softly, you're late, should I take offense? Simon, grinning, I risked a patrol of my father's knights for you. Surely that earns me a pardon. They stood for a moment, the electric space between them heavy with the weight of forbidden affection. Without a word, Simon took her hand, and together they darted deeper into the ruins. Adventure sparkled in the air. Simon led her through a gap in the old wall, where a single torch flickered near a centuries-old archway. Beyond it lay a small underground chamber neither kingdom had claimed in decades. Vines crawled over the walls, and in the center was a table set with stolen luxuries, figs, cheese, and a small bottle of elderflower wine. Tiana, breathless, you remembered. Simon smirking, I never forget your request. They sat close, their knees brushing. As they shared bites and soft laughter, a distant owl called, a reminder of the danger, of who they were supposed to be to one another. Simon's expression softened. Here's the shirt you asked me to bring. She reached up, fingers brushing his jaw. Oh good, so I can lie down on it. Simon, lie down on my shirt? I thought for another purpose. Tiana, what purpose did you think charming? Simon, never mind. The pair moved to a nearby ledge overlooking the river valley. The stars scattered like diamonds above them. Tiana took a deep breath and, on impulse, leapt up onto a stone outcropping, arms out like wings. Tiana, laughing, catch me if you dare. Simon, laughing, following, always. He caught her hand, spinning her into his arms. The world shrank to a heartbeat between them. A breath, a promise. Then at the kiss, fierce and aching.
The castle grounds stretched far beyond what most people knew. Ancient sections overgrown with ivy and guarded by superstition. The Forgotten Garden was one such place, locked for generations, rumored to be cursed. At midnight, cloaked and silent, Prince Simon and Princess Tiana slipped past the sleeping guards, moving through twisting hedges and mossy stone paths until they found the statue, a stone maiden with eyes covered by a cracked blindfold. A cold wind stirred. Without a word, Simon reached out and pressed a hand to the statue's heart. Nothing. Tiana sighed, about to tease him, when suddenly, the ground beneath them shifted. A trapdoor sprang open and they tumbled into darkness. And the secret chamber. They landed in a hidden chamber lit by flickering blue lanterns. Ancient tapestries lined the walls, each depicting kings and queens long forgotten. At the center stood an altar, and atop it a single item, an old leather-bound book sealed with a lock shaped like the same serpent and rose. Tiana brushed dust from an inscription. To the heirs of fire and storm, your fate was bound long before your birth. Simon frowned. What does that mean? Before Tiana could answer, a voice echoed through the chamber, a low, whispering rasp. The war is not over. The danger is within. The torches flickered and a shadow flitted across the wall. They spun around, blades drawn. Who's there? Tiana called. No reply, only a hollow laugh that seemed to come from the stones themselves. The serpent lock on the book snapped open with a click. Inside were pages filled with the royal bloodlines of both kingdoms. And to their shock, a third symbol marked between Alderwyn and Verolia. A third kingdom, one erased from history. Vaerith, Tiana read aloud, her voice tight. Simon's throat went dry. Neither of our families ever mentioned a third kingdom. In the margins, scribbled hastily, they return at the blood moon. Suddenly, a distant bell tolled midnight and the chamber began to tremble. Stones crumbled, dust falling in clouds. Run! Simon grabbed Tiana's hand. They barely escaped through a narrow passage before the chamber caved in behind them, leaving the cursed book trapped in the rubble. Back at the castle, breathless and shaken, they bolted the door to their chambers. Tiana's eyes were sharp. Someone's keeping secrets from us. Simon nodded grimly. And we're going to find out who. As dawn's first light touched the horizon, a blood-red hue stained the sky. The blood moon was coming, and with it, ancient enemies neither kingdom was ready to face. To be continued. The following night, crimson clouds clung to the sky like old bruises, and the full moon rose fat and blood-red above the two rival kingdoms. In the candlelit study of their private chambers, Prince Simon and Princess Tiana pored over what few scraps they had salvaged from the crumbling secret chamber. A page torn from the old bloodline book and a name neither of them could forget. Vaerith. A lost kingdom erased from history. But why and by whom? The marked stranger and knock came at the door. Not from a servant. Not from a guard. From a cloaked figure with a jagged scar across his throat and a silver serpent ring on his finger. The same symbol from the book S-Lock. Simon drew his sword instantly. Tiana's hand hovered over her dagger. The man raised both palms. His voice was raspy, as though speaking hurt. I mean no harm, your highnesses. I'm called Merrick. One of the last of Vaerith. Tiana narrowed her eyes. Vaerith is a dead kingdom. Merrick's lips twisted. Dead only because your ancestors made it so. Alderwyn and Verolia both betrayed us, buried us, but we survived in the shadows. He handed Tiana a sealed parchment marked with a single word. Pact. Simon snatched it, breaking the seal. Inside, an ancient agreement written in fading ink. A pact of alliance between Alderwyn, Verolia, and Vaerith, forged centuries ago to protect against a greater nameless darkness. The betrayal came when Alderwyn and Verolia joined forces to destroy Vaerith itself. It was your great-grandfather's, Merrick rasped. Greedy for land, terrified of what Vaerith's magic could do, so they slaughtered us and buried our history. Simon felt his stomach churn. Tiana's face hardened. And now, she demanded. The blood moon rises tonight. Our descendants gather to reclaim what was ours, to punish the kingdoms that betrayed us. His voice dropped, a chill in the room. Unless you stop it. Of the shadow gathering, guided by Merrick, Simon and Tiana left the castle under cover of darkness, riding toward the borderlands where the ruins of Vaerith's ancient temple still stood. The air grew colder, unnatural. Around the crumbling temple stones, cloaked figures gathered, hooded and silent. Some wore the serpent and rose emblem. Others bore twisted versions of Alderwyn and Verolia crests, faded and marked over. Tiana whispered, How many are there? Simon gripped her hand. Too many. In the center of the circle stood a woman in silver armor, her hair long and white as frost, her gaze cold and unblinking. The lost queen, Merrick murmured. Queen Elenra of Vaerith. She raised a dagger to the sky. Its blade gleamed crimson in the bloodlight. Tonight, she declared, her voice both cruel and sad, our blood debt is repaid. Yet a dangerous bargain before the dagger could fall. Tiana stepped forward. Wait. 1,000 eyes turned. I won't pretend our kingdoms were innocent, she said, voice steady. But this and another massacre won't fix what was stolen. Simon joined her. You want justice. We want peace. Let's strike a new pact. Now. Merrick watched, hopeful. Queen Elenra's eyes narrowed. And why should I trust the bloodlines of liars? Tiana smiled grimly. Because we're not them. A tense silence hung thick in the air. Then, the dagger lowered. I'll give you till the next moonrise, Elenra said. Prove you're worthy, or your kingdoms burn. She vanished into mist. Back at the castle, exhausted and shaken, Simon and Tiana returned to the castle. 24 hours, Simon muttered. To rewrite history, Tiana added. They clasped hands, and this time it wasn't just adventure or romance binding them. It was survival, and the future of two kingdoms hanging by a thread, to be continued. The next dawn arrived shrouded in thick, unnatural fog. The blood moon still clung faintly to the horizon, a lingering omen. In their chambers, Simon and Tiana wasted no time. They needed answers, proof, and a way to convince both their families to atone before Queen Elenra's army razed everything. We need the old royal archives, Tiana said, eyes sharp. Simon grimaced. They're sealed beneath my father's throne room. Guarded. Cursed, some say. Even better, she grinned. At the secret passage, they slipped away at mid-morning under the pretense of a diplomatic hunt. In truth, Merrick had shown them an old servant's passage leading deep beneath Alderwyn's grand hall. The walls were damp, etched with ancient symbols neither of them could read. Your ancestors were creepy, Tiana muttered. A sudden freeze. From the shadows, a figure appeared and an old woman in tattered robes. Beware the heirloom, she croaked. It listens. Before either could react, she vanished into the dark. Simon paled. That was my great-aunt Alira. She's been dead 30 years. Tiana grabbed his arm. Then we moved faster. We numbed the forgotten archive. They reached the chamber, a vast underground vault of brittle scrolls and decaying tomes. In the center sat a pedestal, and atop it, a gleaming blackened crown. The crown of Vareth. They kept it as a trophy, Tiana whispered, fury in her voice. Simon picked up a nearby ledger, its pages chronicling the original pact and the betrayal. Names, dates, signatures. Proof. But as he touched it, the crown glowed faintly and the chamber trembled. A voice echoed from nowhere. Blood calls to blood. The ground cracked open. Shadows twisted, forming a figure. Queen Elenra herself, or what remained of her spirit. Time's run out, little prince, she hissed. One way or another, the debt is paid tonight. The bargain. Before she could strike, Tiana held up the ledger. We have the truth. Let us show the kingdoms. Together. Elenra's spirit hesitated, the flicker of grief crossing her features. You'll never stop them. Not both courts. Simon stepped forward. Then help us. End this curse yourself. Break your own chains. A long silence. The shadows pulsed. Finally, Elenra nodded. Bring the crown of Vareth to the blood tree at dusk. Alone? Then she vanished, leaving the crown cold and dead once more. The unforgivable choice as they left the vault. Simon and Tiana knew what had to be done. If we do this, Simon murmured, we'll destroy our family's legacies. Good, Tiana said fiercely. They deserve it. They kissed, a promise forged in danger. And far above them, in the royal council chambers of both Alderwyn and Verolia, shadowy figures whispered of war. But it was already too late. Because in the forest that evening, the crown of Vareth would choose its new master, and the future of three kingdoms would rise or fall by nightfall. To be continued. Dusk bled across the sky, and with it came a suffocating hush over both kingdoms. At the edge of the ancient forest, Prince Simon and Princess Tiana stood before the gnarled, twisted blood tree, its branches heavy with dark leaves and the weight of centuries of vengeance. In Tiana's hands gleamed the crown of Vareth, the cursed relic of a kingdom betrayed, stolen, and buried by the ancestors of both their bloodlines. Simon exhaled slowly. Ready? Tiana gripped his hand. Let's finish this. At the final gathering from the shadows, Queen Elenra's ghostly figure appeared, no longer twisted with hatred but weary with centuries of grief. Behind her, cloaked figures and the last blood heirs of Vareth stepped silently into the clearing. Place the crown, Elenra whispered, and speak the vow. But before they could, a thundering of hooves and clashing armor split the night. Both royal armies arrived. King Aldric of Alderwyn, sword drawn, King Solomon of Verolia, eyes blazing. Step away from that crown. Aldric roared. You're leading us to ruin. Solomon spat. Simon stepped forward, ledger of proof held high. You did that yourselves, he called out. This is your history, your crimes. You murdered an entire kingdom for power, then buried the truth. No more. Tiana raised her voice. Tonight we end this, or we all burn. The blood vow, a tense, terrible silence. Then Elenra spoke. Swear it. All of you. A new pact. Not of power, but of memory. Of truth. Simon placed the crown upon the blood tree's roots. Tiana unsheathed her dagger, slicing her palm. Simon did the same. Together they pressed their hands to the crown. The blood sizzled against the ancient metal. Light erupted from the ground, spiraling into the sky, turning the blood moon pure white. We vow, they said together, to bind the three thrones, to rule as one. No kingdom erased, no voice silenced, no history forgotten. Elenra's spirit smiled, a sad, peaceful thing, and began to fade. At last, peace. Aftermath at dawn, the armies laid down their arms. The old two kings, shamed and stripped of power, watched as Simon, Tiana, and the surviving heirs of Vareth forged a new council, the Three Thrones. The two kingdoms of Alderwyn, Verolia, and the restored land of Vareth were bound together by truth, memory, and blood. The cursed crown was buried at the roots of the blood tree, never to be worn again. After the blood vow, after the armies laid down their swords, and the ghosts of old grudges faded with the blood moon as last light, the new age truly began. The royal wedding. The day arrived under a sky so clear it seemed impossible such darkness had ever hung over their lands. Prince Simon of Alderwyn and Princess Tiana of Verolia will get married. The three thrones were placed side by side in the grand stone courtyard that spanned the former border of the three lands. Where soldiers once clashed, now crimson and silver flowers bloomed. Bells rang out from towers that hadn't sounded together in centuries. Tiana wore a gown of deep silver, embroidered with symbols of all three kingdoms, fire for Alderwyn, storm for Verolia, and a serpent rose entwined for Vareth. She carried no crown that day, only a simple ring Simon had made for her from the first stone they found at the blood tree. Simon, abandoning the heavy velvet cloaks of his ancestors, dressed in crisp white and midnight blue, his sword sheathed in peace. They walked side by side, no one leading, no one following. At the altar stood Merrick, the last surviving elder of Vareth, offering the blessing. Let old wounds be sealed, he spoke, and new roots grow from the same soil. They vowed love, loyalty, and laughter, and to rule with honesty in a land where no one in its history would ever be buried again. The celebration, the night, exploded in music and lanterns. The once divided courts danced side by side. Even King Aldric and King Solomon, stripped of crowns but left as honored elders, raised their goblets in grudging peace. At midnight, under a sky scattered with 1,000 silver stars, Simon pulled Tiana into a quiet corner of the garden. So my fierce, rebellious queen, he murmured. Think we can actually run three kingdoms together? Tiana smirked. Please. We tamed ancient curses, faced vengeful ghosts. This'll be easy. They kissed. The new crest as dawn broke. A new crest was unveiled above the castle gates. A flame, a storm cloud, and a silver serpent coiled around a blooming rose. The mark of a land reborn, and this time it belonged to them.